and welcome to the Amplifying Scientific Innovation video podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sophia Onoye, founder and CEO of the Sophia Consulting Firm, a life science marketing and communications consultancy that was established in New York City with the goal of amplifying scientific innovation. The goal of this podcast is to showcase scientific innovation stemming from global life science companies through conversations with senior leaders who share their unique leadership journey, corporate vision, and industry outlook. My guest today is Dr. Loddie Foose, Global Director of Commercial Development at Seqirus and founder and global lead for Women in Healthcare Giveback, an affinity group within the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association, or HBA, that is focused on service to local and global communities. Loddie is a mission and results-driven healthcare executive with 18 plus years of experience spanning business strategy and operations leadership. She has cultivated a rich systems-wide perspective and general management training within healthcare through her time working in the payer-provider space and across many functional areas in biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies. She's a versatile leader who is passionate about engaging people and developing high-performing teams to build enterprise value. She has a strong business and scientific background and is passionate about developing and serving others. Her professional accomplishments include work as a former management consultant, both independently and with the Boston Consulting Group, completion of a management of technology program at the Berkeley School of Business, in addition to a PhD and postdoctoral work in chemical engineering from UC Berkeley and Caltech. Loddie is also a former fellow of the National Science Foundation and winner of multiple teaching and mentoring awards within the University of California and American Society for Engineering Education. Loddie and I connected following a virtual introduction by a fellow HBA member, the amazing Wendy Vitolo, and I'm truly excited to feature one of the prominent HBA leaders who exemplifies the true meaning of HBA impact. Welcome to the show, Loddie.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and thank you for the warm welcome.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. It's really great to have you here. So my first question is probably my favorite. What is your definition of scientific innovation?
Well, you know, it's funny, when I was a bench scientist, it was all about molecules and machines and what can they do. But there's a couple facets that I would put forward for you, Sophia, around scientific innovation and how I'd like to think about in this discussion with you. One is really around boundaries and how do we either expand them or remove them in thinking about innovation. And I think really good examples we see of this now are actually even in the COVID-19 pandemic. So as you look at companies trying to develop vaccines, you see players that typically would have been competitors in a different therapeutic area actually coming together, combining technology platforms to try to build a vaccine that's going to be more efficacious for populations. You also see them rethinking clinical trial design and working with regulators to do really accelerated and innovative trial designs so that, you know, between that and their willingness to really start to scale up production at risk, we actually have vaccine development happening on a 12 to 18 month scale, where traditionally it would have been 5 to 10 years. And that doesn't come without that willingness to kind of redefine our boundaries, redefine how we collaborate across companies, regulators, policymakers, et cetera. And, certainly you see this on the regulatory side as well. Where the FDA, both in the collaborations with industry as well as with other regulators, like really releasing all of the review materials from emergency use authorization so that regulators in other geographies can also try to accelerate access to potentially life-saving vaccines and therapeutics. So I think that idea, that one facet of innovation that's a bit more borderless and where we're redefining our boundaries is something that's quite important. And then the second facet I'd love to talk to you about a bit more and explore in our conversation here today is about engaging people with diverse perspectives in really a movement. So thinking of innovation as a movement of people rather than as something that stems from one or a few individuals.
Oh my goodness. I really love what you said about innovation as a movement of people. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of diversity of thought. I think that if we rely on the same voices or the same instruments, the same tools, the same gadgets, then it doesn't tie in with the first sort of definition that you gave that really emphasized that evolutionary piece, right? So innovation is going to evolve over time as we learn new ways to collaborate and to appreciate that we're all different and we have a different perspective and point of view to bring to the table. So thank you for that.
No, and I love what you said, because it's true. Same thinking, same results. Diverse, innovative thinking is going to lead to diverse, innovative results.
Exactly. I mean, that's the beauty of innovation, really, that ability to go back to perhaps the same problems, but with a different lens. So thank you for sharing that. So my second question for you is, what would you consider to be your most significant professional or scientific accomplishment to date?
Yeah, and this is a fun one, right? I think thinking about it in terms of this concept of redefining boundaries and enrolling others, I think back to when I joined my organization a couple years ago and really identifying an opportunity that I saw for us to think differently about the market landscape, about the events that we were seeing, and what they really meant from more of a cross-functional perspective. What are the different elements and movements we were seeing from a competitive, regulatory, policy, et cetera perspective? What did they mean? What were the implications for us as a business? And how should that shape our thinking, our decision-making, and the investments that we make? And so with the support of, a great team and my leaders, I architected for our company the Market Intelligence Program, which is intended to do just that, with that intent of bringing together people across boundaries to have the right conversations, and then of course, building the right tools and processes, et cetera, to do that. How do we make sure that we're allowing the right things to inform our decisions so that we can be really thoughtful and strategic about those? And I think one of the fun things is, building a program that then has everyone from, some of our frontline scientists through to our president himself saying, I want to be a part of that. I want to join that. I want to add value to these conversations. And then seeing that translate as well into the strategies that we're shaping, and how did we rethink some of our pipeline product strategies to really increase our return on investment, because we erased boundaries, brought people together to really assess things in a more holistic fashion, understanding more of the different elements, enabling greater influence, right? When you unlock that door, people can actually see more from each other's perspectives instead of living kind of in functional silos. And that idea of bringing people together to build value is hugely powerful.
I love that intentional decision making. And I think it ties back to your earlier point around the movement of people from a diversity of thought perspective, and making sure that everyone's opinions and voices are heard. And that's how you really get senior leaders to start to pay attention to what you're doing. So congratulations to you on that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And when people feel like their voices are heard, you're going to get a lot more organizational buy-in if you go and try to redesign a development program than if people are like, where did this come from?
Yeah. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. So now if we switch gears briefly to a macro view, as a senior leader, I would be curious to know what you think are some of the unique challenges that female leaders face, and how does the life science industry compare to others from a diversity and inclusion perspective?
Yeah, this is a very interesting one, right? The crux of the challenge is pipeline leadership. And how do we have that leakage in our pipeline for leadership development? You look at early pipelines and women make up like half of the managers, and then you start to see a decrease as you look at more and more senior roles. This past fall, it made the news that we had our 39th Fortune 500 CEO is a woman. That's less than 8%, and
Yeah.
only 3 of them are women of color. So it just goes to show you the fact that it even made news. It goes to show you just the opportunity that lays there. And, if you zoom in a little bit more into really the pharma and the medical, the healthcare industry, you see some additional trends. So where, again, women are making up about half of the managers, you see more dramatic drop-offs than you do in some other sectors, like media and entertainment or the public and social sector. And, healthcare systems in particular, the drop-off is even more significant. Women make up like 2/3 of manager roles, but very few senior executive roles. And so we have to ask ourselves, like, why is this disparity there? How much of it is about personal choice versus really the right corporate culture and mechanisms to build diversity and inclusion? And the other important question, I think that's an important part of the conversation, is why does it matter, right? This is not a nice to have. It's not a feel good. Study after study has shown that increased diversity actually leads to greater financial performance. So McKinsey did a study this year that they released, and actually showed that organizations that had a greater proportion of women in leadership roles and senior leadership roles, outperformed by at least 50% their peers on EBIT and various other financial measures. And just a few days ago, I saw an article in Fortune, and Fortune and the Boston Consulting Group defined this new index, the Future 50 Index, based on these companies that, are demonstrating increased agility, and ability to really drive sustainable long-term growth through the decisions that they're making, the investments that they're making. And interestingly, those Future 50 Index companies also had a greater number of women in senior leadership roles than any of their peer groups. So over and over again, we're seeing that there is this huge latent potential that still needs to be unlocked, to really allow us to deliver on what we're trying to achieve in the healthcare industry and to truly create value.
I mean, extremely well said. I could not agree with you more. I personally believe that a narrative does not change until we make these issues our issues, right? You have to speak about the things that matter to you. Otherwise, people will keep pretending that it's okay. To me, it is not okay. I think that plenty of opportunity for women to, especially women of color, to have a seat at the table and to showcase that diversity of thought that has been a theme of our conversation so far. So thank you for that. Now, I remember the first time I spoke with you, you said, I think within the first minute of our conversation, you highlighted that outlook is a choice, which I found highly inspirational. I told you I was going to write it down and I would never forget it. So now I'm thinking about that. What is your leadership mantra and how has it contributed to your current role in global product management at Seqirus?
It is interesting, isn't it? Outlook is a choice.
Yes.
We can choose to have something be an obstacle that slows us down, or we can say, well, that's just a learning along the way towards that ultimate success. And I think the important thing is really owning that vision of what does that ultimate success look like. And once you do that, anything else that happens along the way actually is just an opportunity for you to learn and sometimes even accelerate and think in new ways about how you're going to get there. My current leadership mantra, leadership mantras evolve with the person, so they're always fun, different things that get your attention or that you want to kind of emphasize for yourself. I thought I'd share with you my signature line that I actually use right now. For work is, I met a great manager and knew that they could lead. I met a great leader and knew that I could lead. And I think that is so meaningful because leadership is something that's far beyond ourselves. It's about seeing the potential and help bringing out the potential in others. Because then what you have is not, a leader with a bunch of people on their team trying to achieve something. You have a leader with a bunch of leaders standing shoulder to shoulder, trying to achieve something that's a common vision. So I think that that's where you actually become completely unstoppable.
I mean, that's remarkable.
Movement.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And thinking about your current role now, how does that sort of apply? How do you utilize that in your daily, I guess, your day-to-day activities?
Well, it certainly helps with recruiting and keeping some of the best talent, and really starting to drive that deeper sense of ownership in what teams are trying to do. It also comes into play even in the program I mentioned to you earlier, that was really about cross-functional engagement and ownership. That ability to actually bring multiple people to the table and have them truly own their piece of it. It comes into everything we do, whether it's leading through influence or directly leading others.
That's, again, very remarkable. We talked about this prior to this interview. I love your background. It's very Zen-like. And I get this perspective of you as someone that is truly inspirational. And I don't say this all the time, believe it or not, but you are definitely someone I'm going to keep an eye out on, because if you're not a biotech CEO in the next 5 years, I will hunt people down, because you are exactly the type of leader that we need, because you know how to inspire people, and ultimately people like to work with people that inspire them, that see them, and that help them grow. So thank you for sharing those perspectives.
Well, thank you for saying that, and may I live up to it.
I know you will. So we have a few things in common, one of them being the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association. So I'm curious to know what inspired you to join the HBA?
Yeah, the HBA is such a great organization, and I don't know if all of your listeners are familiar with it, so I'll just put out there briefly. The Healthcare Businesswomen's Association was founded in the 70s, and it's focused on, gender parity. How do you actually help companies get the most value from their talent? How do you develop women leaders? And also, increase the networking and the connection and the collaboration to enable everyone to kind of lift each other up. And it's just a phenomenal organization. A mentor of mine is actually the one who first introduced me to the HBA. And I remember thinking at the time, why did it take me so long to find out about this organization? This is not something that should be a well-kept secret. So I was quite excited. And I have found that the more I've put into the HBA, the more I've gotten out of it as a volunteer. Learning so much from so many different women, and having collaborations that really span industries, geographies, jobs, years, whatever it is. It's a fantastic organization.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm actually going to share something I don't think I've shared with you before. I'm going to become the president of the HBA New York's chapter. Yeah. Actually, I think I'm already the president of the HBA chapter. And I think, to your point, there's never been an organization that I feel like whatever time input I've put in, I've gotten something out. And you go into these organizations not thinking about sort of a quid pro quo type of arrangement. You want to support, you want to be part of something, but you end up being incredibly supported. And one of the things that I absolutely love about the HBA is the Women in Health Giveback program, which is something that you founded. And I'm curious to know, how has COVID-19 impacted the program, and what is your vision for the future?
Yeah, something I'm very passionate about. And sometimes we shorten that to We Give Back, so I'll probably do that here. And it's exciting because it's about really leveraging the passion and the network of members of the HBA to achieve something great in this healthcare industry that we all care deeply about, while also developing the women who are in the program, giving them opportunities they may not normally have, for example, in their day jobs. There is nothing that we cannot achieve together. If you take that many leaders across healthcare with that many different areas of expertise from that many different companies in that many different geographies, and you set your minds to achieving something together, what's going to stop you? The answer is nothing.
Yes.
In particular, COVID was just such an interesting challenge, I think, for us as a team. And COVID actually ended up being an opportunity for us to accelerate our growth globally for We Give Back. And it was my role as a leader with the team to kind of open the door to that possibility of COVID being something that, because people were looking for additional ways to engage in some different way, because people were more open than ever to virtual collaboration models, it made us borderless, right? Why couldn't we actually operate across every single region of the HBA globally to try to achieve something together? And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Sophia, about Outlook being a choice. So we chose to see COVID as an opportunity to amplify the positive impact we were trying to have on communities. We chose to see it as an opportunity to really get a wonderful, dynamic, diverse group of leaders together to try to solve, you know, a major healthcare problem. And so the result of that choice was we created our own new reality, right? So our new reality became that we had now a global nonprofit partner, Project Cure, who's the largest supplier of medical aid globally. They have over 130 countries that they work with that are low resource, under-resourced countries. And we have a group of over 100 women globally who are volunteers in our We Give Back global Give Back program. And we're basically trying to do a couple things. One is source, you know, difficult to acquire medical equipment that sometimes sits used but no longer needed in storage, et cetera, within US healthcare system, and actually get that to Project Cure so that they can distribute it overseas so that communities, doctors and nurses who are trying to actually build local health clinics have the supplies, the equipment to actually do so. And then the second thing that we're doing is helping put together these kits for kids, which is, you know, basic health, well-being, hygiene supplies that people like you and me were lucky enough we could just go to a local pharmacy and be like, oh, let me grab that off the shelf. That's not so easy for some communities. And so we're also putting those together to get that to families in need. And so it's just so exciting because now we have this group of women that we never could have had if we hadn't sort of collaborated and been borderless in our innovation model. So we're innovating the way we think about global volunteerism.
I love your passion. I think it's so evident. And one of the things that I also think is remarkable is through COVID, I've seen your LinkedIn group in particular grow as a result of this interconnectivity and this sort of global view of how we can give back. And obviously for our viewers, we're going to include a link in the transcript for today's video podcast episode. And it's so easy to find you all on LinkedIn as well. So I'm really excited about your journey and your growth, and perhaps most importantly, your passion for something that is so important.
Well, thank you. And the more minds and hearts we have involved, the faster and higher we'll go.
Great. So obviously, diversity and inclusion has become not just a mainstay topic, and what I hope will be a mainstay topic for this year, next year, and the future. But even within our conversation, it's naturally just sort of come up time and again. So now I'd like to know from you, what unique challenges do you think that female leaders face?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting when we have conversations, you find areas of commonality, don't you? Shared experience. You know, it's not uncommon for women to actually have experiences when I've had conversations around, you know, being invisible or unheard in some situations where they were trying to share their voice, their perspective, or sometimes having different standards applied to them when leadership development opportunities arise. And I think one of the things we still come up against here is this piece around Outlook. So how can we treat those challenges as an opportunity to have the right conversations, to actually increase the awareness of, you know, what's happening with these inequities, these inconsistencies, because awareness is that first step to actually then being able to, you know, get alignment and drive towards some action so that you can change things. You also, I think, learn a very important skill when you come up against these challenges, which is the skill of self-advocacy, learning to see these opportunities as a way to challenge you to actually practice self-advocacy, and to not give up, you know, when no is the first answer that you hear, I think is quite important. And every day there are millions of people across genders, it's not just women, but millions of people who are trying to have these conversations, these small conversations, and move the mark forward. And the more we have of that, we're slowly but surely progressing that arc of justice, right, towards progress. So we will get there, but it takes a lot of conversations.
Oh, I completely agree with you. Again, without some kind of action, things are going to stay exactly how they are. But if we want to evolve the narrative, then we have to be part of those conversations. So once again, very well said. So what advice would you have for young people in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, especially women who may be interested in joining a biotech or pharmaceutical company?
Yeah, and actually it's funny because I was just a few weeks ago, I was presenting at a seminar for the postdoctoral association at University of Chicago. And really, I would say some similar things, which is that the possibilities are endless. Just do it. In particular, as we unlock more around human biology, there's no limit to what we can actually achieve. That's really transformative to patients and populations in this space. And so it's such an exciting time to enter this industry. I think the most important thing is just, again, remembering the outlook piece, which is never give up.
Yes.
The world is your oyster.
Yes. Go out there and be the best person that you can be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you are, be the best of it.
Yes, that's my belief. And, you know, when I came to the US over 18 years ago from Nigeria, I wanted to be the best that I could be. And I'm grateful that I was able to meet people like yourself that encouraged me to take that path and to be bold in my decision making. So thank you for that great advice. Now, my second to last question is thinking broadly, what are some key consideration factors that will be important for sustaining innovation in the life science industry?
I think we need to be borderless in our thinking. Innovate without borders, knowledge share without borders, really drive and leverage our combined strengths to drive successful execution without borders. That's where true value creation comes from. Really, that really puts the patients at the heart of things. It's about thinking about how do we grow the pie? You know, so often people get stuck in this, well, I just have to grow my wedge of the pie. And that's a scarcity mentality, right? It's about you can only have more if someone else has less. But as soon as you realize that you can innovate in a borderless way, you create an entirely new pie. And there's a lot more both value creation and results for patients.
Thank you. I think we're in a new era, and that era is about collaboration, and it's also about globalization. We're not all in our tiny little pockets. We're part of one big world. So in closing, I would like to ask you a very simple question. Do you have any other thoughts or comments that you'd like to share with our audience?
I just want to say thank you. This was a lot of fun. And Sophia, you're just so warm and thoughtful and intelligent and just lovely to speak to. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for encouraging all of us to think about scientific innovation in new ways.
Well, I'm really speechless, but now I am. So, so thank you very much for your kind words. I think the encouragement and motivation, it goes a long way. And my belief is that platforms like this will continue to see the light of the day. And it comes down to our dedication to having conversations about the things that are important to us and to think about that movement of people and the diversity of thought that it will take to really sustain innovation on a global basis. So thank you for a great conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day now. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.